with the entire ecology of our community, not just gun violence, education and housing and employment or under many the African American church gathering place to deal with problems and challenges of the community. So we're just simply trying to continue to do what have been doing at churches when they met in the hush harbors and they tried to talk about issues of concern, from slavery to voting rights to Jim Crow to lynching. And this present moment is no different than that. So I thank all of you for coming, young people, not so young people, old folks, and everybody in between. I'm hoping that we can make some progress today. This, I hope, will not be the last day, but rather the beginning of something. And so that's about as much as I wanted to say, because I'm really anxious for us to talk to one another. And I want to thank Gary Spencer and members of our church ministries that felt that this was a social justice issue that we needed to bring to the table and not postpone. So to all of you, I say welcome, God bless you, and Gary, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Reverend Andrews. So what we're going to do is introduce you to Tiffany Williams-Roberts first. Tiffany is a lawyer in town who is an activist in the make of lawyers from the 60s. She's been, not only is she a professor at Georgia State, but she's also been very active in the Black Lives Matter movement. So I asked Tiffany to come on down. We've also invited other people from other groups like Rise Up. So if you all are here, please let it be known so you can have something to say as well.
Thanks, Gary. Good afternoon. I was expecting to be joined by friends, and so I hope that as they show up, we can talk a little bit more. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm an Atlanta native. I went to undergraduate school and law school in Atlanta as well, and I began my legal career as a public defender in Atlanta Judicial Circuit, which is the Fulton County Superior Court, handling felony cases. And after that, I went on to start my own practice and became employed at my alma mater, Georgia State University College of Law. And I'm the deputy director of our ethics consortium there, as well as an adjunct professor. During my time as a public defender, I was really at all times confronted with the realities of our criminal justice system, the biases that seem to permeate that system, and the lack of resources to provide my clients with adequate redress. In 2008, my friends started a group called Building Locally to Organize for Community Safety. We went by the name of Blocks, and one of our first objectives was to assist other groups who were already working to give our Civilian Review Board more power. And we became sort of a public safety organization that emphasized that our safety is not dependent on law enforcement, that law enforcement can be one component of public safety, but that communities make themselves safe. I would listen to stories that my mother would tell about how the men and women in her community made sure that the young people were cared for, that widows were cared for, that children made it to school safely, that everyone ate. And so our objective was to emphasize that law enforcement is only one piece of that puzzle. I later became involved with Black Lives Matter Atlanta. I know everyone is familiar with the hashtag, but it's actually a national communication network. And our chapter was co-founded by Dre Probst, who is here in the front row. from Chicago, and another friend named Mary Hooks, who many of you may know. Later, at the end of last year, that chapter was formed, and so we are still working to sort of establish ourselves as a group here in Atlanta. We want to move policy not only with respect to police brutality, but we also want to move policy with respect to the entire criminal justice system, as well as other biases that permeate other systems that oppress our people. I welcome any questions about Black Lives Matter specifically, about our goals and objectives, about the state of Atlanta currently. And I see that another attorney, activist attorney here is here. Many of you probably know him, Mally Davis, one of my mentors, as Gary is. And we're working really hard not only to work with the community, but also with professionals and lawyers specifically, because we all have a role to play, and we believe that it's our duty to use our skills and our blessings, our degrees and our finances to support this movement, because our children's lives depend on it.
So, if folks have any questions or comments, Tiffany, I think that there are always questions about what are the goals and objectives of Black Lives Matter. Maybe you can help us with that.
Okay. Our overarching goal is to dismantle the systems that cause Black people to be disproportionately impacted by wrongful arrests, brutality, inadequate education, and that requires that we address legislation, but that we also address conditions in our own community. Our current national, I want to say, thrust is divest, invest, meaning divest from the militarization of police, divest from the overcriminalization of Black folks through, new legislation that puts more cops in neighborhoods and doesn't put more school counselors in schools, and to invest in our community's educational systems, Black business, and it's really our children, that we believe that we need to invest more in our children. So what the National Communication Network asks is that every city set goals for itself, because we know that, for example, a city like Atlanta is very unique because a lot of people in positions of power in the government look like us. And it's sometimes difficult to convince folks that though folks look like you, if the system was designed to reinforce notions of white supremacy, that it doesn't matter if you have Black elected officials and Black police officers, and that may be different in a city like Louisville. So, for example, one of our educational campaigns this summer has been educating folks about Operation Whiplash, which was the city's response to the uptick in violent crime in zones 3 and 4, which, in our opinion, looks a lot like the stop and frisk policies that are complained about in Harlem and the Bronx and New York City that we found made the city so volatile, and we believe that it's nothing more than broken windows policing. So we have, for example, a teach-in tomorrow at 6:30. 6:30? Tomorrow at 6:30 at the Southern Zone New Ground office, which is in the West End at 580 Holderness Street. And we want to present the community with information about that particular policy, and then other things that they can do to address it. And we also want to discuss Kwanzaa Hall's legislation that seeks to repeal about 80 city ordinances that were either drafted during Reconstruction or at the beginning of Jim Crow, that constitutes sort of our broken windows policing code in Atlanta, and how to support his legislation.
Does this rise up? Well, you can hear me. Mine is comments. It's what you're saying sounds so familiar to me. I don't know, there are some people in here who are old enough to remember a man named Herman Talmadge, who used to be, there's a senior and a junior. Herman Talmadge was the governor of the state of Georgia. He was running for a second term. I grew up in Moultrie, Georgia, which is near the Florida border. And we, as blacks, we didn't know that we had any power. Herman Talmadge campaigned wearing white pants and red suspenders. And we recognize him by that and his comment. He was always talking about what he was going to do to the Negroes. And he was going to do this to the Negroes, and he was going to do this to the Negroes. Well, the Negroes didn't know what to do except to pray. At our church, we had prayer meeting every Wednesday night. But then Daddy started taking us to church every night. We prayed and prayed and prayed. Well, Herman Talmadge won. But God took him before he took office. So we think that prayer works. I still do. You can agree with me or not, but I was a youngster at that time, and prayer worked for us that time. He won the election, but he did not take office. And this was his second time around. I am a writer, a formerly retired educator. And I just got a response today from one of my first books. But I want you to see what I'm thinking at the time. My book is titled Black Parents Matter. Their godly lives leave a lasting legacy. And on the cover is a picture of my parents, who did a great job of protecting us from police. I heard you say and the community did do that. But my dad was only 14 when he had to leave school to become the head of his family because his dad had left them. And, well, you can read the book, but I'm going to just tell you what's on the back here. It says, Odessa Walker Hooker has written 5 books. 3 of them are about her family. The first one, With Heads Held High, Legacy of My Southern Parents' Prayers, and that was released in 2003. Unconditional Love was the second one. 4 Walker grandmothers share their role in the education of their grandchildren. That was released in 2013. And that was written with the help of 3 of my sisters. And this one, Black Parents Matter, Their Godly Lives Leave a Lasting Legacy. Now this is what prompted the writing. The recent rash of shootings by police of African American males prompted this question for her. This is written in third person. What is the role of parents in keeping their children safe? This book recalls how intentionally and prayerfully Hooker's young parents worked to rear her and her 8 siblings. They struggled to shield their children from contact with police. And a quote from a 19th century cleric, R.A. Torrey, persuaded her to include the stories of her parents' grandchildren in the telling of their role-playing parenting. Torrey said, one can't begin to judge a man as a Christian leader until you meet his grandchildren. 18 of the 28 grandchildren contributed to this book. And I'm going to have a book signing here as soon as somebody can arrange it for me. But I want to make a few more comments. In our town, Moultrie, Georgia, there was a railroad track that divided the black and the white community. So I never had contact with whites. The first time I saw a white teacher was when I got to college. Of course, that was also the first time I saw a new textbook and knew a lot of other things. But my dad, who is my hero, and who left school at 14 to become head of his family, became my father when he was 17, same age as Trayvon Martin. But he was almost instrumental in keeping us safe. He took all he kept the children safe. And it's remarkable how he did it. Of course, he did it with prayer and with God's help. So I'm glad Pastor's going to talk about that, start talking about that. I'm the oldest of 9. Focus, my parents, that all of their children graduate from high school, the key. They had not been able to, and they wanted us to graduate from high school. And this is how they did it. These are young parents. My mother was 16 when I was born. My dad was 17. They decided that one of them had to stay home with the children, so that would be Mama. She stayed home with the children and took care of the house. And Dad brought in all the money. Well, he was not an 8th grade, and living in the South, he had no employable skills. But watch how this skillful man did it. You couldn't keep his buttons fastened when 6 of the 9 of his children graduated from college, and he was the only worker in his house. And my mother never worked outside the home a day in her life. It's amazing what parents can do. So my title is hashtag Black Parents Matter. Their godly lives leave a lasting legacy. And I want to tell you in this book how they did it.
I would love to talk with you more about that. I'm sure all of us would. Thank you so much.
Again, you are welcome to come down to the microphone. Thank you for all coming.
First of all, I want to thank young people for stepping up and stepping out. I'm in a generation where I was small. I was born in 1959, so I was a kid during the Civil Rights Movement, and now I'm older and don't have any energy and insight. Thank you. But I see the media painting Black Lives Matter as this random group of ragtag young people who have no structure whatsoever in various cities causing havoc. And you alluded to a national organization, so I'd really appreciate if you talk about how groups across the country talk to each other, get common goals, so people understand it's not a bunch of just angry people with no direction and no purpose, you know,
Sure.
just making havoc in the street. So I'd appreciate that.
Sure. Yes, so Black Lives Matter has a national organization. We call it a National Communication Network. And the founders purposefully declined to trademark Black Lives Matter because they wanted it to be accessible to people everywhere. You know, you see Black Lives Matter protests even in Palestine. Each city decides for itself what its structure will be. What the organization asks is that you affirm the 10 guiding principles of Black Lives Matter, which is listed on blacklivesmatter.com. We are an inclusive organization that refuses to marginalize people based on sexual orientation and gender. And we have common goals, but we have strategies in each city just depending on what those needs are. A lot of times what happens is, for example, in Atlanta, we've been doing police work for a while. A lot of, recent law graduates, college students have been doing police work for a really long time. And when the hashtag emerged, then everyone started using the hashtag, and that continues. But there are a lot of organizations in Atlanta that predate the hashtag that are doing this work, and sometimes we all get lumped in together as Black Lives Matter. And it can be a problem, for example, if there are groups doing work that conflicts with what our principles are. But for the most part, we believe that it's our responsibility to support the work of other organizations. So for example, the protest that took place at the governor's mansion was actually led by some college students, very young people, like younger than I am. And they go by ATL is Ready, and then there's another group called Rise Up. And while ATL is Ready is sort of a collaborative effort of other organizations, they led that charge, and we supported them in that. But that was one of the protests that some people had a big problem with, but we didn't. But we also didn't want to take credit for their work. As far as leadership goes, our belief is that it's unnecessary to censor one individual for the entire movement for several reasons. One of those reasons being that if opponents can discredit that one leader, then they can effectively discredit your entire movement. And we know about Ella Baker, and we know about Fannie Lou Hamer. So we know that the movement wasn't just the 6 people that you saw, leading people across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And because of that, we want to sort of illuminate the reality that social change doesn't happen under the leadership of one individual. And we find that other organizations sometimes have a problem with that because, you know, for example, just logistically, they don't know who to contact about a particular thing, right? Or they don't know who to call to do press for a particular thing. But we just try to be, we're intergenerational. We respect our elders. We welcome them into our space. We respect those people, for example, Malcolm X Grassroots Movement and other organizations who have been doing resistance work. We welcome them to train us, do teach-ins for us, and we just don't want to leave anyone behind. And we're hoping that, you know, 50 years from now, when history looks back on us, they'll see that we were doing the right thing by being inclusive and transparent. You're welcome.
And then I'll pass it to whomever. But when you spoke earlier, you talked about some of your guiding principles, one being the demilitarization, the divesting, I should say, in the militarization of the police force, and then investing in education. And I want to understand a little bit more about the investing in education, because it is my opinion that that is one of the most pressing needs of our community. The fact that our children are getting a very poor and subpar education, and quite frankly, sometimes I'm lost as to where to start, because home is really the starting point of education. So please help me understand the investing in education.
Sure. When I was a public defender, I would have, so we get the felony teenagers at 17, and I would have clients, you know, you get to know them so that they can trust you and you can help them. And I had more than one client tell me that they weren't allowed to take their books home from school. I had more than one client explain to me that there was no one to help them with their homework because either their parents worked 20-hour days or their parents suffered from addiction issues, mental health disabilities. And so education was always a really big part of, is still a really big part of representing young people caught up in the system. Even judges recognize it. So you go to court with the client, and I'm sure Mallory knows this too, that you go, maybe he's 17, and the first thing the judge wants to know is, well, why doesn't he have his GED? Why hasn't he graduated from high school, right? And they may make that a condition of the sentence, which is fine, but when there's no institutional support for that student because maybe they've aged out of going to public school, or they've had behavioral problems, or they've been hit with a zero tolerance for violence in school, zero tolerance for really addiction. So we say zero tolerance for drugs, and we say they're drug-free zones, but really it's also a zero tolerance for addiction in schools. Is really difficult to help kids when they meet the system. So that's one of the reasons it's so important to us. On tomorrow, we are going to welcome, after we do our teach-in on criminalization in Atlanta and Operation Whiplash, we're also going to welcome the president of the Georgia Federation of Teachers, I think is the name of the organization, to talk about the Opportunity School District referendum that will be on the ballot in November. So opposing that legislation is one example of things that we think folks can do to empower our children. There is a group that we work with called Street Groomers, and they are brothers who were members of street gangs, and they are doing the work of sort of the Panthers. They make sure the kids get to the school bus. They make sure they get home from school. They make sure that the kids have food to eat after school. They make sure that if a child has a mother who maybe is abused by someone, that can be addressed. They do de-escalation work in the community to sort of diffuse conflict among us. And I think that's another example of work that we support that makes it possible for our children to learn. The Atlanta public school system just swore in their first wave of officers. And some people see that as a win because that means that the Atlanta Police Department is coming out of schools, but I've handled many cases where the police officers employed by the school district are often worse than those who are on the streets because they are sometimes the ones who were not hired by local municipal police departments or those who were dismissed from other departments. So working with the Atlanta Public School System to see what we can do to make sure that our children go to school in an environment where they are not labeled as criminals by virtue of the tax bracket of the community that they live in. We, like I said, we're a new chapter, so we welcome one of the things that we really need is community involvement and community input, because we believe that the goals of our organization must come from the people, especially the people most affected by these policies. And so we welcome educators, current educators, retired educators into our space to give us to shed more light on what else we could be doing. But we certainly want to support work of organizations like Street Groomers. We just participated in a HIV testing and book bag giveaway on yesterday morning at West End Mall, supporting another organization. So we just want to be at all times available, one, to support existing work, and then also to take cues from the community about what we could be doing and what we can be doing better.
Can I interrupt you just for a moment?
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Baylor, and I am a retired national staff person of the United Church of Christ in the Washington, D.C. office, and working on criminal justice and mass incarceration. And I wanted to just let you know that the United Church of Christ supports the work of Black Lives Matter, and I personally support the work of Black Lives Matter. And the United Church of Christ has been very involved in the international, the Interfaith Criminal Justice Coalition of about 50 denominationals working in around the district to, and this is national denominations working on criminal justice. And one of the things that we often lift up is the importance of voting, and the importance of the United Church of Christ has its own program called Our Faith, Our Vote, where we try to make sure that our churches understand that in order to change the system, a lot of times it begins with that vote. And that doesn't mean just federal, as you know, means state, county, local. And so trying to get our churches to be involved in that. But what I want to ask you is, recently, I've just been hearing a little bit about Black Lives Matter, not necessarily this chapter, but encouraging people not to vote, to say that we need the system to change before we're voting. That kind of disturbed me. I've read that a little bit. And I don't know which chapter that is, or I don't even know if it is a chapter. It might just be some individuals who are disgruntled about the way things are going within our system. And we all are very upset and disgruntled, but not voting is not the way to go. And I just wondered if you might be able to speak to a little bit about what the position is of Black Lives Matter on voting rights. Thank you.
On April 17th, we held an event called When Will Black Lives Matter to Prosecutors, and it was a forum for the candidates running for Fulton County Solicitor General. It was held at a theater in the Old Fourth Ward, and we focused our questions entirely on issues of mass incarceration, education, the abuse of mentally ill people or mentally disabled folks. So we have certainly been encouraging our community to learn more about the candidates running for offices that most affect them. Most of us believe that local politics are far more important than people realize. We want to encourage the city of Atlanta to more seriously consider their stance on marijuana, for example. And we know that the mayor of Clarkston was just able to push through a decriminalization ordinance. So one thing that we wanted people to understand is that Fulton County Solicitor General arrests or handles the cases that are processed for that ordinance. So, right, people might have an opinion about legalization, but they don't know the person who is responsible for prosecuting the 18-year-old who gets caught with a dime bag, and understanding the sheer numbers that flood our municipal and lower county courts for just marijuana, right? And so we understand the connection between public policy, elected officials, and those things that are plaguing our communities. So we have not had an official push to encourage people to vote. We encourage people to refrain from voting or abstain from voting. We do acknowledge why people are skeptical of the two-party system on the national level, but we are a nonpartisan organization, so we never endorse anyone. But one of our founders, Patrice, just did an interview with Melissa Harris Perry and shared who she voted for and why. So it is not at all a national objective of the Black Lives Matter communication network to encourage folks that they shouldn't vote. I think there are just individuals, and we believe that folks are entitled to believe what they believe. We certainly want for our communities to understand the importance of dialogue and influence on elected officials who can legislate our children into prisons or out of them. You're welcome.
I did want to take a minute to introduce Mallory Davis. Mallory Davis is another activist lawyer in our community who's been doing great work not just with Black Lives Matter, but other organizations who are concerned about social justice issues. Mallory, if you could maybe introduce folks to what you have going on Tuesday.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I think I was here downstairs about 3 months ago, and we were beginning a good dialogue around Black Lives Matter and the other efforts that our young people are doing to take to the streets. One of the things that we're doing as a legal community is to put together, there are really kind of 4 ways that we can be supportive of the protests. And we expect that, one, unfortunately, there will continue to be young people killed by law enforcement, unarmed young people, and we expect that our young people will continue to respond through protests, through marches, through occupations, through sit-ins, by any nonviolent means necessary. And so there are 4 ways that we've identified that we can provide support and let them know that we have their back and we support this new and different push for civil and human rights. So the first is to provide legal observers for the protests. So anyone can be a legal observer. It just simply means you have been trained on being a neutral and observing, recording, and reporting what you observed during a protest. Unfortunately, one of the tactics here in Atlanta by the Atlanta Police Department has been to indiscriminately arrest people who are engaged in the protest, even when they're not violating the law, even when they're trying to follow police instructions, and they snatch them out, arrest them, all to create a chilling effect so that the young people, people stop coming out, people stop taking to the streets, and it just changes the whole dynamic. And so legal observers serve the role of being the eyes of the community and letting law enforcement know that we're here recording what you're doing, and you should be very careful not to violate anyone's constitutional rights. It's called jail support. Jail support is when the protester gets arranged for a bond, that is communicating with that protester, that will meet the protester. They're being give them a hug, give them a slice of pizza, let them know that your community supports you. And so that requires a great deal of logistical, networking, and a lot goes along with it. But that's another. Both of those areas, you don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to be legally trained. All you have to do is have the desire and the will to come and receive the training. And then the last 2 pieces, which Gary and Tiffany and I have been doing, is pro bono legal representation. When someone is arrested, we are going down to the courthouse. We represent them all the way until the case is resolved, whether they want to do community service or if they want to go all the way to trial. We're there and saying we will go with you through that process. And the other is we do pre-protest training so that the protesters understand that if you do these things, that's a violation of the law. Here are the possible consequences. Here is where you may be transported to. Just all of the things that young people need to know. Here's how it may impact you if you want to go to medical school, if you're trying to get some kind of license. So those are the things that we think we have a responsibility so that the young people, as they go into action and they go into battle on behalf of us, that we've given them enough information for them to make decisions. So with that being said, on Tuesday, we're doing a training at Georgia State College of Law, and we have flyers and we'll have them circulated. We hope that you would take a picture of the flyer, post it, share it. But this is a way for people to get involved who, some folks say, well, I'm not a marcher. That's fine, but there are other ways, and there have always been ways that we can support our movement and not necessarily be on the street. But we shouldn't ever condemn because the young people for taking to the street. Because if we had the answer, right, as much as we love our young people, if we had the answer, they still wouldn't be getting killed in the street, right? So we've got to say, we don't have the answer. Maybe y'all had the answer. We can support you as we try to figure it out together. So thank you all. I appreciate the time. And again, I would hope that this is the beginning, perhaps, of a Black Lives Matter, an understanding of Black Lives Matter tour of churches, right? Could this be the start of Black Lives Matter advocates and supporters going around from churches? Maybe First Congregational has started something so that folks that are just getting their information about these young people and they're trying to criminalize them won't rely on mainstream media, but instead will speak. This sister Tiffany, how can you not support her? She's a mom, she's a lawyer, right? And, and Dre and Dawn, these folks, they're working. So the idea that they're this disorganized group, they meet all the time. They meet so much I can't keep up with them, So that's all. Thank you all.
Just recently, I was talking at City Hall, and I was talking about how young people that I end up interacting with saying to them, why should we vote? And just like I always tell folks, when you vote, you also have to hold those people who you put in office accountable. Because a lot of times we put people in office, and when something happens, and then all of a sudden we want to throw up our hands. Now we must also have a purpose, a plan, and a destiny. Because most of us nowadays are walking around, don't know what the purpose, don't know what the plan, and we got to watch who we follow. Because the thing is, even though Black Lives Matter, and they doing the right thing, but there's some people that can come around and use their logo and say, I'm a part of Black Lives Matter, and then all of a sudden, there's a big stigma behind it. So we must get involved, not just when something going on or something not going on, but we must get involved when something ain't going on. So we must also continue to hold our elected officials accountable, not only in Washington, here locally, because a lot of times we'll say it's the president's fault. And I remember when the president tried to hold a gun bill or what's not, and then you got Congress fighting against him. You got the Senate fighting against him. But we always want to put it on one person. But it takes a village to do what we need to do to keep our life safe. And even though we have cameras, and they putting cameras up, and the young lady that was killed over in Oakland City Park, we just got a face image. We can't even identify a person. But the thing is, if we're just putting cameras up using the taxpayer dollars just to use it, your life and your kids' life should matter. Even though kids are scared to go to school now, most of them. And it's ridiculous. So not only we must hold our office accountable, but we must hold our elected officials accountable because indeed they are employed by our elected officials.
Good afternoon. I know Tiffany. We went to college together at Emory. My name is Julius Jessup Peterson, and I am also a part of the United Church of Christ, but I'm also a therapist in the city. And as one of the mental health providers in the city, what I want to know is how can we better address some of the mental health needs that are going on with not just the young adults who are experiencing violence in the city, but their families, particularly the mothers and the fathers.
I would direct you to Rise Up. Rise Up is another organization here in Atlanta, and they have a campaign called Mental Illness is Not a Crime. They support the family of Anthony Hill, who was the veteran who was shot by the police department while he was naked in DeKalb County, right? Yeah, DeKalb County. So they support Nicholas Hill, and so they have this campaign called Mental Illness is Not a Crime. I can provide you with their contact information. I think their website is Rise Up. Oh, we have a Rise Up person here. Dawn's in every organization in Atlanta. So she is a child care provider. She's awesome. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about the campaign?
You can go to riseupgeorgia.org, or on Facebook, it's Rise Up.
Yes. So I know you were talking about the other organizations. They're kind of like an attachment to Black Lives Matter. I'm not really the protesting type. I'm not in that area. But my concern is more about planning and re-education of our community, and more like, if we're sitting here and we're gonna go and sit in the streets, I wanna know, what are we doing in our actual situation to say, this is how much power we have, this is how much, you know, when it comes to economic power, when it comes to, okay, so our kids need to know how to not be dependent on this system, because to me, I don't believe the system's gonna change. I believe the system is instilled to be exactly the way it is. That's why all the generations can never get it to change, because it is so there. What are we doing to say, you know what, the system, whatever, this is what we're gonna do here?
If I understand your question, I think you're asking, what work are we doing to empower our communities outside of relying on the system to change so we can, so that's a complicated answer. One thing that we know we can't deny is that that it's possible to address public policy and make our folks safer while educating them. So for example, Southerners on New Ground, which is an organization that supports Black Lives Matter, has a campaign called Free from Fear. And the Free from Fear campaign is work that says to the municipal court systems across the country that they can no longer finance the budgets of cities on the backs of poor people. Because we see poor people going into municipal court and paying tickets that they cannot afford, being on probation for over a year for ordinances, paying private probation. In Atlanta, we're serviced by one of the largest private probation companies called Sentinel Offender Services, and there is no purpose other than for them to collect money, right? So there are no mental health services provided. There is no drug treatment provided, right? Maybe you have to go get tested for whether or not you've been using drugs while you're on probation, but as far as real help, that's not provided. So we know that we have to address that, right? Even if we're not depending on the system to save us, we have to agitate and resist a system that continues to oppress us. I mentioned street groomers earlier because they are a perfect example of an organization that says, look, they have little to no resources. They know that they have their minds and they have their bodies to put on the line. And they know that, for example, they just posted, hey, we're in English Avenue, Vine City, what other neighborhoods? Yeah, mostly Northwest Atlanta, West End. We are walking kids to school, spread the word. We are walking kids home from school, spread the word. We're going to start doing more political education events for the community. Black Lives Matter Atlanta has working groups. For example, we have a working group for the arts. We have a working group for youth. We have a working group for healing and self-care, because I fuss at Dre all the time. He doesn't eat half the time. He doesn't drink water like he's supposed to. So there are things like that we want to make sure that we can be self-reliant and self-sufficient. He's smiling because it's true. And then there are organizations like Malcolm X Grass, so to speak, organizations here, classes, community defense classes. So again, we don't believe that we don't believe we have the right to take over work that is already being done and that has been done for years. We think that if anything, we can help if the hashtag or the National Communication Network has brought some folks into activism that really wouldn't have considered it before, we think it's our responsibility to say, hey, this organization, go over there and talk to Mowley if you're interested in this. Come over here and talk to Don if you're interested in that, because those movements have been progressing for decades, and we're grateful that social media and this moment have provided all of us with an opportunity to elevate that work and make it more accessible. Oh, right. So we have initiatives. So the Bank Black initiative that a lot of folks who support Black Lives Matter, that think that Citizens Trust said they opened something like 8,000 new accounts because we said put your money in black banks. Not just us, lots of folks. We also have an event called Spendify Black Fridays, where on Fridays we invite the community to support a different black business every Friday. So we understand that group economics are important. And we just hope that it kind of multiplies, or that the groups that are already doing it continue to do it. We don't think we're the only show in town.
It's spendify.com. They promote the self-sufficiency.
It's Spendify.
Defy how you spend your money.
Spendify.
And then EFY, Spendify. And a young group of young brothers and sisters put this company together to help better connect us to African American businesses. So yeah, it's not just protest politics, it's also nation building work. And next Saturday there'll be a Black August event at the Hammond House next Saturday at 5 o'clock to discuss kind of self-determining organizations that focus more on self-determination and building capacity for outside of having a function kind of within the system.
And if you're a black business owner, about your business to be included in that directory.
Good afternoon and greetings all. And thank you, young lady, for coming. You're brave to sit in front of this audience, right, and take these questions. A couple of things. I remember being in college, and I came home for the holidays, and I protest. I was not going to cut my hair till the war in Vietnam was over. I had a huge afro, just wow. I walked in the house. My dad said, "What's wrong with you, boy?" I said, "I'm not cutting my hair till the war in Vietnam is over." He says, "I'm not paying your tuition till you cut your hair." And so, okay, I cut my hair, but the point was that in that my little protest and all my little buddies, we sort of dismissed all the history. We dismissed the success. We had a better way of doing it. Rather than dismissing it, we may have been better off to build on those successes that were happening. Because I read the reading last week, the King letter, phenomenal letter. It talked about the steps of addressing these issues that are worth just considering. White racists understand us. They think how to get us. We're wonderful, passionate people, and we just get excited, and we do. But we calm down, and they dismiss us. How many movements have happened? So I'm saying it's a great opportunity for you to say, okay, look, Mr. White racist, don't work that way this time. But let me tell you what's happening. There have been 17 states. Oh, one thing that Martin Luther King said in his letter, first get the facts. Get your facts, and you got something you can work with. He also talked about self-purification. As a people, we got work to do. So what I'm saying is now there have been 17 states, 17, that has changed the voter right laws. We all know why. How did that happen? How do we stand by and let that happen? I remember the people who died in this struggle. I remember the fire hoses. I remember Bull Connor. I remember the dogs. I remember whites locked arm in arm with us fighting this stuff, and they were behind us, and there were whites, Mary Jo Kopechne, who lost her life. It was a unity thing, and it was a wonderful thing. And my concern is that in our effort to find a solution, we sort of get our energies and get watered down. How can it be? How can it be in Flint, Michigan, that 6 people decided to save money? A town of 100,000 people. Do you hear me? 100,000 people. And they poison the river. How can that happen, people? If we're working, if we're doing our job, how can that happen? Because we're not doing our job. And in fact, black lives don't matter. That's how they did it. Do you understand? If it doesn't matter to us, why should it matter to them? Pine Street, a disgusting facility, helping black people. How can we pass by that facility and see what's happening there? Little kids outside, there's drugs there, there's prostitution there, there's tuberculosis that can't be cured, all that stuff in that building. This lady is just sucking up the rent money and making money off these people. And these guys come down and talk to me. I don't have the answer. I have the answer for me. I know what God tells me to do. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm coming with the alternative to the Pine Street facility. I'm working on that. And it's big, which I think big. I got the kind of God. I don't ask for thousands, I ask for millions. If God's my banker, I ain't going to ask for $5,000. Give me millions, you got it. So I went that route. And when I go that route, oh, I wish you luck, Levi, and pat me on the back. I'll pray for you. I went to some white investors. They love the idea. You see what I'm saying? This is not a black man problem. They're good white folks out here. Ooh, and they got money too. So I'm just saying, this is not a black man's problem, but you got to take leadership in this. Black lives don't matter. How can you jail thousands and thousands of men? By the thousands. Because black lives don't matter. You understand what I'm saying to you? I'm angry and upset. I'm saying, trust me. Get in the system and fight. Your vote matters. And if this demagogue get in office, we all gonna be back picking cotton. Do you understand?
I want to, let me just tell folks who don't know that Levi Butler is one of the deacons here, and he is single-handedly responsible for addressing folks' individual needs who come through the downtown area, who need MARTA cards, who need utilities, and that sort of thing. So we thank Levi for his work.
Say that my name is Ron. I'm an educator, veteran, and I want to say very, very proud of you young people, because what you all doing takes guts, you know. And for those of us who are old enough to remember, as far as all the pushback against Black Lives Matter, I remember back in the day, all the activists had the same kind of pushback and stigmatism against them. They, you know, they said that Malcolm was violent. Malcolm X, you know, we became part of. Shouldn't ever kid anybody out. Anything of that. You got to be aware of the propaganda that's come against Black Lives Matter. Okay. And second point I want to raise, and this is maybe on a larger level, but the FBI put out a report. I can't remember exactly when this report was put out, but one of the greatest threat is white supremacists joining the police force. And that's what we're dealing with here. And not just the police force, but the the legal system, our prosecutors and our judges. And so, you know, this police killing, we all know this is nothing new. It's just being recorded. And even after it's being recorded, these killers are still walking free. You know, so this is nothing new. And for you guys to do what you're doing, get out on the street, you know, I marched, I think the first Thursday after Valanda was killed, I marched you guys from 5 Points to Piedmont. But this is nothing new, it's just being recorded. So one of the things we have to be cognizant about is the pink elephant in the room that I don't think anybody's talking about. That's white supremacists joining these police force. So that's something that has to be addressed in any way we can address that. Maybe push some legislation to make these cops bond and insure so that if something happens that it won't be the municipalities paying, but it'll be they're paying for this, okay? And I want to give you guys some information to get involved and serve whatever capacity that I can.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Pastor mentioned this morning a testimonial. I'm going to give you a personal way that I address all the happenings that I'm in. I have been a solo mom for 46 years. My oldest son, who's a member here, he's out of town right now, is the first African-American executive director of the Atlanta Regional Commission right down the street here. His wife is the first and only black president of the State Bar of Georgia. My middle son has just joined the faculty at Notre Dame. My younger daughter works at Georgia State, and my youngest son is in restaurant management. Now let me tell you what I do as a person. My children grew up without television. Oh, really? Yes. I've never bought a television set in my life. As an educator, I knew I could not compete with television, and I couldn't sit there and watch what they watched, so I just didn't have television in the house. That took care of that. There are lots of things you can do, and I tell parents, I was a formal educator for 40 years, and I still teach. But mothers, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. Mothers have a 9-month head start. You can teach Doug, the one I mentioned, my oldest son. I taught him music here before he ever saw the daylight. The first 3 years of a child's life, he or she learns half of all they're ever going to learn. I don't care how old they get. And who is usually in charge at that point? Mothers. There is a great thing you can do as a mother. I have been a single mom for 46 years, reared 5 children with God's help. Asked him to be the dad because I couldn't be both the dad and mama, and asked him to teach me how to be the mama. And I want to know, this is, as an educator, I'm going to raise one question. How many people here are familiar with Shaka Senghor? Shaka Senghor, S-H-A-K-A-S-E-N-G-H-O-R. He's a young man who just spent, when I say just, he's out now about 5 or 6 years, 38 years in prison. Shaka left home because the family broke up. The father and the mother couldn't get along. Father had to leave. Mother was mentally ill, but the father didn't know that. So Shaka takes the brunt of it. Mother beats him until he can't stand any longer. He leaves home, gets into drugs and all kinds of trouble. He's out of jail now, and he's lecturing at Harvard, at MIT. He spent 19 years in prison, 7 of them in, what is that when you put, solitary. And you know what his salvation was? You will never, what was his salvation? Does anybody know Shaka Senghor? His salvation was reading and writing. He couldn't stand the noise and the cussing and all the dirty things going on, although he's there with them, but he couldn't stand it. For his own privacy, he started reading, and he said, I finally started reading the Bible. I thought, oh, you finally got it. But Shaka published 2 books before he left prison. He has published 5. Well, when last I read, he published 5. His book is called Righting My Wrongs, W-R-I-T-I-N-G, Righting My Wrongs. There is nothing to replace educating our children. And when parents used to say to me, I can't because I have to work. Well, I'm talking to them as a teacher. I'm working. The responsibility for children is parents. I still make this, the primary responsibility for children is parents. And you as a parent can do an awful lot. But read Shaka Senghor's book. It's called Writing, W-R-I-N-G, Writing My Wrongs. And see, know him. Do you know Shaka Senghor? He might be, he can give you some information. He's lecturing all over.
Thank you. We're trying to respect everyone's time. It's getting close to 2:30, but I did want to hear from Dawn.
Hi, my name is Dawn O'Neill, and I am a member of Black Lives Matter, Fight for 15, and Rise Up Georgia. I'm also a mother. I am one of the oldest ones, I think, in our group. I'll be 50 on my birthday in November. I have 4 children. I have 3 daughters who have finished college. My youngest son is 16. And I've raised all my children, even though I'm divorced, me and their dad play a big role in their lives. I've never feared for my children except my 16-year-old son. And I've taught him everything that I think a mother could teach, a child. And every time he walks out that door, I am in fear of his life. And if any of you have teenage sons, I implore you that even though you might not agree with some of the policies of Black Lives Matter, you might not agree with some of the ways that we take to the street, but we are in the streets for our children and our children's children and their children. I don't believe that these police killings are going to stop by us just sitting passively by and being quiet. I really don't. I love this dialogue and what we're talking about here in this place, because this place was the center of the civil rights movement back in the 60s. Dr. King did peaceful, nonviolent protests. And I guess my question would be, where is the church now at this time? Because this was the center. This is where it began. What happened? That's my question. What happened? And like I said, if you have a son and you're afraid of him, you're afraid of what could happen, even though you have taught your son how to deal in society, how to deal with police, how to be respectful, they might not be respectful of him and what you have taught him. That's all I have to say.
On that note, I want to thank everyone for coming. I think this is the beginning of a dialogue. Certainly First Church, we want to be a part of this. I am thankful that we are in a congregation where we have these discussions. And as we close out again, we want to thank you for coming. I wanted to go ahead and give Dr. Andrews the last word.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Tiffany. I'm very proud of you. One of my former students, hallelujah. I want to thank all of you for coming. I know it's been a very long day, but I wanted to remind you that we said at the very beginning, we hope this is the beginning of something, not the end of something. The one thing that I learned today is that this is a very complicated puzzle, as Tiffany said, and there's not one single solution to a problem that has had 400 years to develop. And so my fervent prayer is that we will continue to not only be in dialogue, but to be engaged in ways just like this, that we can figure out what our next steps are. And there's so much wisdom in the room, there's no reason for me to try to reiterate anything, but do remember that the beginnings of the Black church was a response to the racism and the oppression. That the Ku Klux Klan was also the sheriff in the various counties. People didn't trust the police in the 1870s and 80s, and so that we've had a long time to get to where we are. conversations that we have and then the partnerships that we forge, we'll get a chance to be creative in new 21st century ways for a problem that has had a long time to develop. And so I'm just the next steps. And I do want to respond to what they can do. And we're just one of many churches that are having conversations. But I think we've been misled by the media that we think the media is telling us what churches are doing. The church is still educating its people. It's still public defenders and support. That's why we're here this afternoon. So let's listen to each other, because there's nothing that can replace the one-on-one that we control. So, let's just figure out, we're going to go in peace, but we're going to come back and do some more of this to do the work that needs to be done. Final thing is this. What we have to do is we have to make a commitment to struggle. Not that there is going to be something that's going to happen and this will all go away. What we're committed to is each other. And we will continue to struggle until God comes and says you don't have to struggle anymore. But that's my hope, that we will keep struggling together, learning from each other, and keep on working. Or as Curtis Mayfield used to say, keep on pushing, because that's what we got to do. Thank you all so much.
And finally, just in terms of commitment, today is Tiffany's 6th anniversary, and she's here with us. So we particularly thank you. Thank you all for coming, and we look forward to these discussions going further.